Robert Greene spent years studying the lives of the masters, Leonardo da Vinci, Charles Darwin, Mozart, Benjamin Franklin, Freddie Roach, Temple Grandin, not as biography, not as inspiration, but as forensic investigation. He wanted to understand not what they achieved but how. What was the actual sequence of choices, disciplines, failures, and transformations that produced a human being operating at the absolute frontier of their field? And more importantly, was that sequence repeatable? Was mastery a gift bestowed on a rare few by the accident of talent, or was it a process, learnable, structured, available to anyone willing to pay its actual price? His conclusion, argued across 500 pages of biography, psychology, and strategic analysis, is unambiguous: mastery is a process. It has identifiable phases. It follows recognizable patterns. The masters were not visited by genius from above, they built it, through a specific and demanding sequence of steps that began with finding the work they were uniquely suited to pursue, moved through years of disciplined apprenticeship, and eventually produced a quality of perception and intuitive intelligence that looked, from the outside, like magic. It was not magic. It was the accumulated result of an approach to learning and practice that most people never adopt because they never understand it is available to them. Mastery is Greene's most personal book, the one he has said he wished he could have read at 20. It is also, in many ways, his most demanding, because unlike his books on power or seduction, it cannot be used as a tool to gain advantage over others. Its only application is the slow, private, unglamorous work of becoming genuinely excellent at something that matters to you. Here are 5 of its most essential lessons. Greene opens mastery with a concept he calls the life's task, the work you are uniquely suited to do, the intersection of your deepest inclinations and the world's needs that, if found and pursued, produces not just competence but the particular kind of intensity that drives people to extraordinary levels of achievement. He traces this idea through the lives of the masters and finds the same pattern again and again. At some point, usually early but sometimes embarrassingly late, each of them encountered the specific domain that lit something inside them that nothing else could match. And from that moment forward, however circuitous the path, everything they did was in service of getting deeper into that domain. The word he uses is primal, a primal inclination, something that precedes conscious decision, something that feels less like a choice and more like a recognition. Darwin did not decide to be obsessed with the natural world. He discovered, as a child collecting beetles in the fields near his home, that the obsession was already there. Leonardo did not choose to be consumed by the problem of how light falls on a surface. He discovered that he could not look at anything without needing to understand it at that level. Greene's argument is that each of us carries something similar: a particular sensitivity, a specific fascination, a set of questions that never stop nagging, and that the work of finding your life's task is not invention but excavation. The practical instruction here runs directly against the advice most people receive about careers and purpose. We are told to be strategic, to identify where the opportunities are, where the money is, where the market is growing, and to position ourselves accordingly. Greene is not saying strategy is irrelevant. He is saying that strategy in the absence of genuine inclination produces competence at best and quiet desperation at worst. The place to begin is not the market. It is a memory. Think back to what absorbed you before anyone told you what you were supposed to care about. What did you return to compulsively, not because it was useful but because it was alive to you in a way other things were not? That signal, however faint it has become under years of practical decisions, is the beginning of the thread. Follow it. The most immediately useful and most resisted section of mastery concerns what Greene calls the apprenticeship phase, the period of deep, disciplined learning that must precede any genuine creative contribution to a field. He argues that this phase typically takes 5 to 10 years of focused effort, that it is characterized more by observation and skill absorption than by creative expression, and that it is not a detour on the path to mastery but the path itself. There is no shortcut around it. There is no version of genuine mastery that does not include it. The only question is whether you enter it consciously and strategically, or stumble through it inefficiently because no one explained what it was for. Greene identifies 3 phases within the apprenticeship itself. The first is deep observation, entering a new environment and resisting the urge to make your mark, instead watching, listening, and learning how the field actually operates beneath its surface conventions. The second is skill acquisition through relentless practice, identifying the core skills the field demands and drilling them past the point of comfort into the territory of genuine internalization. The third is experimentation, beginning to push at the boundaries of what you have learned, testing your own ideas against the reality of the field, accepting the failures that come with that territory as information rather than verdict. Most people get impatient at the first phase and skip the second entirely, arriving at the third with insufficient foundation and then wondering why their experiments keep failing. The resistance to genuine apprenticeship is one of the defining problems of the current era. We live in a culture that celebrates the overnight success, the 22-year-old founder, the person who disrupted an industry before they fully understood it. Greene is patient and systematic in his dismantling of that mythology. The overnight successes almost always have 10 years of invisible work behind them that the story does not include. The young disruptors almost always benefit from either exceptional mentorship, the specific advantage of genuine naivety in a field that needed fresh eyes, or both. The pattern of deep apprenticeship followed by creative contribution is not slower than the alternative. It is the only route that reliably arrives at the destination. Identify where you are in your own apprenticeship and be honest about whether you are doing the work that phase actually requires or whether you are performing the motions while waiting for the part you actually want. Greene devotes substantial attention to the role of the mentor in the development of masters, and his analysis of that relationship is more nuanced and more demanding than the way mentorship is usually discussed. He is not talking about a sponsor who promotes you or a coach who encourages you or a senior colleague who is vaguely supportive of your development. He is talking about something older and more intense, the relationship between a person who has already traveled far down the path and one who is just beginning, where genuine knowledge is transferred, where standards are set that the apprentice could not have set for themselves, and where the feedback is honest enough to actually accelerate the learning curve rather than simply making the apprentice feel good about their progress. He traces this pattern through history with remarkable consistency. Darwin had John Stevens Henslow, the botanist who recognized his abilities before Darwin himself did and whose influence shaped the direction of his entire intellectual life. Freddie Roach had Eddie Futch, from whom he absorbed not just boxing technique but the entire philosophy of the craft. Michael Faraday had Humphrey Davy, who was complicated and sometimes resentful of his apprentice's gifts but whose laboratory and standards provided the environment in which Faraday's extraordinary abilities could develop. In each case, Greene argues, the mentor compressed decades of potential stumbling into years of directed development. The relationship between the right mentor and the right apprentice is one of the most powerful accelerators of human development that has ever existed. The actionable demand this places on you is to stop being passive about mentorship and start being strategic about it. Identify the person who is 15 or 20 years further down your specific path, not just successful in a general sense, but genuinely excellent at the particular thing you are trying to master. Then think seriously about what you can offer that relationship, because great mentors are not found by asking for their time but by demonstrating the quality of your commitment in ways that make them want to invest in you. Show the work. Demonstrate the hunger. Be the apprentice worth teaching. And when you find that relationship, take it seriously enough to actually absorb what is being offered, which means subordinating your ego, tolerating the discomfort of honest assessment, and doing the hard work the mentor sets rather than the comfortable work you would have chosen for yourself. One of the most psychologically precise observations in mastery concerns what Greene calls the emotional pitfalls of the apprenticeship, the specific forms of self-sabotage that derail people who have the talent and the inclination to achieve mastery but never quite get there. He identifies several of them: complacency, the comfortable plateau that masquerades as achievement; impatience, the inability to endure the unglamorous middle of the learning curve; the lure of false mentors who flatter rather than challenge; and perhaps most insidiously, the tendency to confuse the performance of learning with learning itself. What connects all of these pitfalls is resistance, the friction between where you are and the deeper level of engagement the work is demanding. Most people experience this resistance and interpret it as a signal to stop, to rest, to find a different approach, to question whether this is really the right path after all. Greene's analysis of the masters suggests the opposite interpretation. The resistance is not a warning. It is a marker. It appears precisely at the boundary between what you can already do comfortably and what you have not yet learned to do at all. The discomfort is not an obstacle to learning. It is the learning. The masters did not push through resistance despite the discomfort. They came to recognize the discomfort as confirmation that they were working at the right edge. This reframe has immediate practical application. Identify the place in your craft where you most consistently slow down, avoid, procrastinate, or find reasons to do something else instead. That place is not where your weaknesses are. That place is your frontier. The work you are avoiding is almost certainly the work that would move you furthest, fastest. Build the practice of moving toward that resistance rather than away from it, not by forcing yourself through it with gritted teeth, but by developing enough curiosity about what is on the other side to make the discomfort worth tolerating. The masters were not people who found the hard work easy. They were people who found what was on the other side of the hard work compelling enough to keep going anyway. The final and most philosophically rich argument in mastery concerns what Greene calls the ultimate form of mastery, what happens after the apprenticeship, after the creative breakthrough, after the years of accumulated practice have transformed technique into something that operates below the level of conscious thought. He argues that at the highest levels, mastery is not primarily a skill. It is a mode of perception. The master does not simply do what others do, but better. The master sees what others cannot see, connections invisible to the less practiced eye, patterns operating beneath the surface of phenomena that appear unrelated, solutions that emerge not from laborious analysis but from a quality of intuition that has been built through thousands of hours of direct engagement with the field. He calls this high-level intuition the return to the primal, a reconnection with a way of knowing that is faster and more comprehensive than rational analysis, earned through the disciplined development of rational analysis over many years. Leonardo could look at the flow of water in a stream and see in it the same patterns governing the flow of blood through the heart and the movement of air over a bird's wing. This was not mystical. It was the product of a mind that had spent decades looking more carefully than anyone around him at everything it encountered. The connections were always there. Leonardo had simply developed the perceptual apparatus to see them. The practical implication of this final lesson is perhaps the most demanding of all, because it cannot be rushed and cannot be faked. It is the product of all the other lessons working together over time, the right domain, the genuine apprenticeship, the honest mentorship, the willingness to work at the frontier of your discomfort, accumulating slowly into a quality of perception that begins to feel less like effort and more like sight. You cannot manufacture it directly. You can only create the conditions in which it develops, and then have the patience to let it develop. The shortcut is to start. Start the right work, pursue it with the right depth, submit to the right kind of learning, and then stay in it long enough for the transformation to happen. Greene's research across the lives of the masters suggests that the transformation always happens, for those who stay. The only variable is the staying. Greene wrote mastery in his 50s, after decades of his own apprenticeship, years of reading, researching, writing, failing, revising, and slowly developing the particular mode of historical and psychological analysis that his work is built on. He did not arrive at his craft quickly or easily. He arrived at it through exactly the process he describes in the book, a deep inclination followed relentlessly, a willingness to subordinate short-term comfort to long-term development, and the patience to trust that the work being done in obscurity was accumulating into something. The book is not an argument that everyone can become Leonardo. It is an argument that every person has a domain in which they are capable of developing genuine mastery, a level of skill and perception so deep that it becomes its own form of intelligence, and that the primary obstacle between most people and that level is not talent but understanding. They do not know what the process looks like. They do not know that the resistance is supposed to be there. They do not know that the awkward, uncertain middle of the learning curve is not a sign that they are on the wrong path. They think mastery is a gift. They do not know it is a practice. Now you know. The only remaining question is what you are going to do with that.